I'm a simple man. I see pretty lady, I pull. I see a hot boy, I also pull. Pretty basic. Usually when it comes to any other video game, I prioritize gameplay first, as I think the thing you should focus on the most in a video game is the gameplay. But when it comes to Zenless Zone Zero, that entire concept just takes a back seat. While the gameplay of Zenless is very fun, it's not the reason I'm here. I'm here because I want to see hot soldier ladies tell me how much they love me. Or as close as to it as I'll get, since, they can't say it directly. However, there is one variation of the gameplay that is getting increasingly common with the release of new agents, to the point where even people like me, who put the gameplay second, are starting to take notice of. And not just that, but also starting to get tired of. In case the title didn't tell you what it is, or chronic Parkinson's made you accidentally click on this video, the thing I'm starting to get sick of in this game is Aftershock. Aftershock was a mechanic introduced in 1.6 with Trigger and Pulchra. It's basically a mechanic that allows off-field agents with this ability to attack alongside the on-field agent. Usually you need some sort of prerequisite, they don't just automatically do this. For Trigger, you need to use her sniper attacks to fill the bar, and when an on-field agent does pretty much any kind of attack, Trigger will appear and attack the enemy. For Pulchra, do things like evasive assists, special attacks, chains, or ultimates, which will fill the bar, and when the on-field agent does an extra special attack, she will show up and attack. There are other Aftershock agents, but you get the idea. At first, I thought it was a neat mechanic that really sells the idea of the agents working together, as it essentially allows all the agents to appear in the battle all at once. It's no surprise most of them are stuns too, because it's very helpful in building a passive stun as well. Having to spend a lot of time playing as your stun before you can get damage with your other agents can be annoying, so being able to both at the same time sounded very novel, and at the start, it kinda was. However, that was at the start of this mechanic's introduction. Pulchra and Trigger were pretty much designed to be used alongside Soldier Zero and B, which it's weird Pulchra was included with that and not with the Sons of Caledon. Anby also does Aftershock damage, but she has to be on field for it, so I'm not talking about her. The ideal team in order was Trigger, Silver, Anby, and then Pulchra, as it allowed you to build up Trigger's bar, then quick assist to Pulchra, who would fill up her bar, and then quick assist to Anby, who could activate both of their Aftershocks without the need of her extra special attack. It was a neat and unique team, and while the three agents had synergy with others, it felt like these three were meant to be paired together. If that's all it was meant to be, life would have been neato and no one would have cared. Aftershock seemed like it was meant to be a one-time gimmick that made one team in particular strong, but unfortunately things didn't stop there. The next Aftershock agent to be released was Zu Fufu, who appeared after Yi Xuan as part of the Yunque Summit faction. Despite being labeled as a stun, Fufu's main role is to activate her Aftershock to buff everyone's crit damage and ult damage. You did this by using either her special attack or ultimate, so she gains mites, then she'll use her Aftershock. So when you're not using her special or ult, you won't really end up using her, since she's meant to just be a useless dagger you strap the Golden Vow to, which I found odd because she has a kit, but you just never end up using it. She has an infinite attack chain with her basic attacks, and she can ride Hue like a bumper car, but using these is completely antithetical to the optimized way to use her. At least with Trigger, you need to enter the sniping mode to build up Aftershock bar, and Pulchra hardly had a kit, so she didn't matter. And even if you went out of her way to use her kit, it's pointless anyway, as her stats are specifically made low so you don't use them. A cool agent, but one that felt a little wasted by prioritizing one mechanic specifically. Right after Zu Fufu, we got a new S-rank agent by the name of Ukinama Yuzua, and guess what, bucko? She's an Aftershock too. This time though, the devs didn't lie about her role and made her a support instead of a stun. I thought Fufu was just an exception because they felt like they made a new mechanic, then only made two agents, but one right after another is starting to make it look like a pattern, and her ways of building her Aftershock bar are the exact same as Fufu's. You just use her special or ult and you have bar now, and all you have to do is use your actual agents and Yuzua plays the game for you. This time though, I don't even understand the point of making her an Aftershock agent. With Trigger and Pulchra, it was to build stun alongside your main agents, and with Fufu, it was the same to a lesser extent, on top of giving you the Roaring Tiger buff. Honest to god, you can take away Yuzuha's Aftershock and very little would change. As far as I know, all it does is deal physical damage, but it doesn't even deal that much and has nothing to do with her actual support buffs. Much like Fufu, she has a kit, but you're not supposed to ever use it. Hoyo is actually actually started telling players when an agent has a parry mechanic, and now they're telling us to not even use it. Yuzua has a very fun parry that allows her to chain into her faster special attack, but there's really no reason to use it, and I kind of find that disappointing. At the very least, they could have given us one of her points if you parried successfully. Now, 4 agents doesn't seem like a lot compared to how many agents we actually have. Technically 5, but I'm not counting Silver Ambi. The thing is, once they were introduced, we were getting one almost every major patch, with the exception of Mockingbird. And my main issue comes down to not only how prevalent they're becoming, but how they're making the gameplay loop of Zenless Zone Zero kinda boring. The main hook of this game was fast-paced, almost Devil May Cry-like combat that was flashy and over-the-top with agents who had kits to match. But for a while now, we've been getting an increase of agents who just play the game for you. Even though I don't care so much for meta, the optimal way to play the game these days is to pick 2 agents who act independently from you and 1 actual agent you can play the game with, and I find it to be a very boring meta. Even agents who aren't Aftershock like Astra and Vivian, whom you either don't use period or occasionally swap to, are starting to get on my nerves. If it was just a small pool, it would be one thing, but we're now getting Orphe, who's also an Aftershock, and I bet you one of those new Spook Shack agents is going to be an off-field support in one way or another. Maybe they've already confirmed it, but I don't interact with official Zenless media outside the game. They slightly remedy the not playing the character issue on Hollow Zero, as some of the gear gives you an incentive to swap to the character, but then I have to ask why this isn't a part of their base kit already. Not Aftershock related, but it would be really neat if Astra had her laser beam from Hollow Zero as part of her base kit, because then I would have a reason to swap to her. The reason I dislike Aftershock more than other off-field agents is because they really all kind of play the same. You build bar, swap to another agent, then the Aftershock shows up and attacks, and everyone but Trigger pretty much builds their bar the exact same way. At least Polkra has the other ways to do it. My initial thoughts as to why we're getting so many of them recently is that Zenless Zone Zero turns out characters pretty dang fast, and since this isn't a gacha game with PNGs, they actually have to create a character with a moveset, and Aftershock is a quick way to create a useful agent without coding a whole kit. But as we've seen with agents like Fufu and Yuzua, they do have kits, you're just not meant to use them, so I'm confused as to why they keep popping up. It just feels like a waste to spend money to get an agent only to see them as a blur across your screen. Another main concern of mine is how Aftershock might end up impacting older agents, particularly ones who are in need of a rework. Grace, as much as I hate to admit it, sucks balls. Unfortunately not mine, and people have really wanted her to get some kind of rework because all she can really do is apply shock, and that only helps us select few agents, and even then it's not that much. It would be really disappointing if Hoyo does end up reworking her, only for her to turn into some kind of Aftershock that builds up electricity off-field. Same with Soldier 11. She does fine damage, but for an S rank she's kinda basic, and since most of Obel's squad is Aftershock, I can see them reworking her into one, and that's literally the last thing I would ever want. While it's not a rework, they have toyed with the idea of having older agents play an Aftershock role. Agents like Jane and Evelyn have gear in Hollow Zero that gives them Aftershock abilities, but in this case I'm fine with it since that doesn't affect their base kits they already have, and you also have the option to just not pick those gears if you don't want to use them. I feel like this should have been the case with Yuzua since her Aftershock kinda feels mostly pointless. I can see why most of the Aftershocks released are stun agents, since building stun can be a pain in the ass, and using stun agents for a majority of the fight to build daze can be annoying. What I don't get are ones like Orphe and Yuzua who are supports with Aftershocks. It just feels like an attempt to force you to not use the agent on field by making it so their main source of damage is from Aftershock. Even Fufu, who's labeled as a stun but ends up being more of a support agent, which has become a growing trend. Off topic, but why is Inhu a defense agent when the only trait about him that's remotely tanky is him being built like the 47th US president? He should have been a support, but I guess that doesn't matter right now. My closing thoughts on the matter is that I think they should consider shelving Aftershock after Orphe comes out. I would be open to the idea of them making an Aftershock for every element, since we still don't have an Ice and Ether one yet, and I would be fine if one of each was made, but after that, I'm sick of Aftershocks coming out, and it's yet another agent I have low odds of getting, only to barely ever see them. I don't like the game playing itself for me. If I wanted one of those, I would have gone to any other gacha game where they have idle mechanics, but this one doesn't have that. At least I don't think it does. And I actually have to play the game to get the rewards I want, and I would really prefer it if it stayed that way. Maybe I'm just being too negative. After all, there are way more agents that you do need to play than don't, but it still gets under my skin that a lot of meta agents like Astra and Vivian are the ones you don't see on screen all that often, and I just want less of that. I understand the more agents that are added, the more difficult it becomes to create unique kits for each one, and since they need to turn agents out on a semi-regular basis, they don't always have the time to create fully playable agents, and Aftershock is just a sort of band-aid fix to that problem. If it were up to me, I would have made Aftershock agents A rank since their kits are far too simple to warrant being S rank. And I know that's rich coming from a Hareen enjoyer, but if they made a Soldier Zero version of her and made regular 11 in A rank, I would be chill with that. At the very least, it would make getting her final Mindscape easier. I know I could always just not pull the Aftershocks, but I'm still a wife first person, so even if their kit is very boring, I still plan to pull based on how depressed they make me because I'll never meet someone like them in real life. If you do agree with me about Aftershocks, you should like the video. Otherwise, I'll cry. Nobody wants that. Unless you hate me, I guess. But am I even big enough to even have haters? Also subscribe. Okay, bye!